I'm Chanala, and this is the Weekly Squeeze on Moral Edge. I want you to meet a young woman from New York. She's in her mid-20s. She's studying political science and Near Eastern languages at NYU. She's serious and idealistic, and she has made the decision that most people in her life probably thought was ambitious to the point of reckless. She is moving to Israel, to Judea specifically, to a small community called Givat Ze'ev, which sits in the hills of northwest Jerusalem, in territory that the whole world has been arguing about since before we were born. That was in 1984, and she is still here. She raised 5 children here. She has grandchildren growing up on this land now. She has watched the hills around her change for over 40 years, watched what gets built and what gets demolished and what gets ignored. And she turned that watching into a life's work. Her name is Naomi Linder Kahn, and I think she might be one of the most important people in the Jewish world that most Jewish people have never heard of. There is a question that sits underneath almost every conversation about Israel's future, about the two-state solution, about settlements, about security, about what this country is going to look like in 20 years. The question is, what is actually happening on the ground right now, on the actual physical land, away from the speeches and the frameworks and the position papers published in Washington and Brussels? Naomi knows because she's been watching it here from her window for the last 4 decades. And for the last several years, she's been the person at an organization called Regavim, who takes that ground level knowledge and carries it into European parliaments and American Jewish communities, and anywhere else people are willing to sit still long enough to understand what's actually happening in the land of Israel. Naomi recently published 2 reports through Regavim that I went to dig into, as easy as ABC, which documents the systematic takeover of Area C and the writing on the wall of Jericho, which should be keeping every Israeli up at night. And this is what makes Naomi different from every analyst or policy expert who publishes on this topic. Naomi has been trying to get people to pay attention to this for years. She walks into rooms, she presents the data, she hands over the documents, and she goes home to Givat Ze'ev, to the hills she's been watching since 1984, to the grandchildren who are growing up in the middle of everything she's been documenting. This is not an abstraction for her, this is her actual life. And I think that's exactly why you should listen to her, because the people who understand this most viscerally are the ones who are living inside of it. And Naomi has been living inside of it longer than most. So she's here today, and we're going to get into it. Naomi, welcome to the show. So glad you made it. How was your day so far running around Israel?
Typical.
Typical. Tell us more. What is typical for Naomi?
Typical is starting the day. Before my first coffee, I was working on 2 separate position papers. One of them we hope will impact decision makers in Europe, and the other specifically focusing on the United States government's probably unknown complicity in some very, very serious problems that Israel is facing, has faced, and will face, unfortunately, even more in the future. So before I even have my first cup of coffee, those 2 things are percolating. From there,
very light stuff.
light stuff, a little bit of light.
Flipping through People magazine, yeah.
Sure. From there, in between, of course, trying to coordinate with my daughter-in-law about babysitting for my grandchildren in the evening, and then running off to a conversation to try to form a coalition with 2 very important new organizations that are trying to get the story of Judea and Samaria out to decision makers abroad. And here I am.
Such important work. Thank you for making time for us.
It's a pleasure.
I want people to know who you are, what motivated you to come here. That's very much a part of our messaging. We believe that anyone can and everyone should make Aliyah. So tell us, bring us back a couple of decades. What was that decision? Did you know what you were building? Did you have any idea what the next 40 years of your life was going to look like, what you were going to be fighting for?
So I'll tell you, I don't think I could have even imagined what my life would look like. It's better than I could have ever imagined. It's more fulfilling, more meaningful, more rewarding, more. than I could even have imagined. But I knew, and this was a joint decision. People often ask me and my husband, so what was the conversation? What made you decide to come on Aliyah? And we both look at one another and we say, well, did we actually have a conversation? We didn't have a conversation because it was clear to both of us. From our last Sheva Brachot, exactly 1 week after we were married, from the celebration, we went straight to the airport, got on a plane, and never looked back. We were both determined to be part of Jewish history and not observers from the side. That meant to us that the place where Jewish history is made, and not some footnote in Jewish history, but the place of Jewish history, the place where it's built every day and has been since the Jewish people came into existence, is right here. And we wanted to be part of that and not just read about it, misreported most of the time, in the New York Times or anywhere else. So we got on that plane and we came with no expectations. We came only with the hope that we could build a life. And thank God we have succeeded beyond our wildest dreams in so many ways. We have, thank God, a beautiful family, growing family, vibrant, healthy, varied family. We actually were part of a clan already because all of my husband's siblings are here. I have my sister here as well. And we're a growing, I would say, typical Israeli family in that we are now really an ingathering of the exiles in a lot of ways. We have children and grandchildren whose other influences come from every single imaginable Jewish diaspora, and they're all here creating this beautiful mosaic of modern Jewish Israeli life.
Wow, if that's not a pitch for Aliyah, I don't know what is. Well, okay, so there's a distance between someone who lives in Judea and someone who writes reports that land up on European parliamentarians' desks. Yes. So how did you get from one to another? And how did watching what's going on in Israel turn into actually documenting it?
Well, for many years, it didn't. I was very heavily involved in academia. That was really my direction.
Describe to people, though, where you live so people understand the nature of your lifestyle.
I live in a community that was established in only about 6 months before I got there, actually. In the early 1980s, the effects of the revolution, essentially, in Israeli politics were beginning to be felt on the ground. When, in 1977, the Likud, headed by Menachem Begin, finally broke through the years and years of labor rule, labor domination of the political scene, a more nationalist, right-wing, I would say, Jabotinsky-leaning government came into control and began to actually increase a lot, to increase the amount of Jewish settlement in areas that were taken back in 1967. Although it is important for me to stress, the labor governments that preceded 1977 also, from 1967 onwards, fully understood the importance of Judea and Samaria, Yehuda and Shomron, for the security of Israel, and understood Israel's rights to that territory, just as the right-wing governments did. But the right-wing governments were more willing to, I would say, ignore international pressure.
And declare sovereignty.
Actually, not declare sovereignty, unfortunately, that still hasn't happened, but to actually act upon their understanding of the Jewish people's rights and obligations in these areas. So Givat Ze'ev is one of the communities that was established in the early 1980s. It was named actually for Jabotinsky. The original name, this is a curiosity that most people don't know, even people who live there, the original name was Giv'on because it is located in biblical Giv'on. When you read the Bible, and the battle at Giv'on happened right outside my front door. And all of the geographic markers that are mentioned in the books of the prophets are right outside my window. I look down into the Ayalon Valley that begins right at my doorstep, and that is where the sun stood still. And the Gibeonites, who made a treaty with Joshua, the village is just walking distance from my house. And all of these places are part and parcel of who I am and what our life is about.
Wow, what a merit to live on the biblical heartland of Israel, where all these
Indeed.
stories from our ancestors took place. You're really living the history and reminded of it with every sunset and every sunrise.
Correct.
Wow, that's beautiful. Well, most people who follow the conflict from abroad, including me before I made Aliyah, Gaza, the West Bank, settlements, checkpoints, Area C, Area B, most people don't have a clue. For someone who drives through it regularly, what is Area C? What was it supposed to be according to the Oslo Accords? And what's it actually becoming? That's the important part.
Okay. So in another attempt to achieve peaceful coexistence with the Arab world, the State of Israel entered what was called the Oslo Framework. The Oslo Accords were signed. The first installment was signed in the mid 1990s, 1995, and moving forward. So the Oslo Framework essentially stipulated areas of Palestinian Arab self-rule, giving them autonomous zones where they could control their own lives, have less and less contact with Israeli authorities, thinking that would resolve the conflict to a very, very great extent. So the division that was created, the easy way to remember it is it's ABC. It's supposed to be simple. A for Arab or Arafat, as you choose. B for Beyachad, together, which means that the Palestinian Authority was given officially all control over all civilian matters, and the State of Israel maintained peripheral security responsibility. And Area C, we like to call that Selanu, which is kind of a play on words for the Hebrew word for ours. It belongs to us. So Area C was the area of Judea and Samaria, the areas beyond the Green Line that were liberated by the Israeli.
Where does Hebron and Kiryat Arba fall in?
So the very, very different places, it can be a difference of inches, right? The big cities were all established as Area A. Those are Hebron and Jericho and Ramallah, Bethlehem. Yes, all of those are Area A. They're completely under Palestinian Authority jurisdiction, and the Palestinian police force is it's supposed to fight terrorism there.
Is that why there's such a
fight
tall
crime
wall when you come into Beis Lechem?
No,
So much
the
security?
tall wall is there because they were constantly throwing missiles and rocks.
So we put up the
out.
wall.
So we put up the
because
wall.
they were jerking their responsibilities for their
Correct.
security responsibilities.
Correct.
Okay.
But the underlying concept of the Oslo framework was, first of all, over 95% of the Arab population of Yehuda and Sharon was placed under Palestinian Authority jurisdiction. So people wouldn't have to deal with the Israelis if they didn't want to. And second of all, the Palestinian Authority was supposed to be the ones who did self-policing, who fought terrorism and prevented that conflict with Israel from the inside. That would free up Israel from having to be in confrontation with the Arab population, would free the innocent civilian population from having anything to do with the state of Israel in a general sense, and would benefit us and benefit them.
But instead,
it's very important to dispel one myth. Most people assume or they're told, which is untrue, that the Oslo framework stipulates that a Palestinian state would be created, that somehow or other the state of Israel agreed to create this Palestinian state as the end result of this Oslo process. That is false. In nowhere, in no way, at no time did any government of Israel ever agree to the creation of a Palestinian state.
Because it was never an option.
Correct, because it's suicidal. People like to say, people at Regavim like to say, give me 50 years of no terrorism, and then we can talk about coexistence. And I like to say, give me not 50 days, give me 50 hours in which not one single Arab resident of Judea and Samaria tries to kill Jews, and then maybe we can talk. We have not had that ever, not since the state of Israel was created, not before then, not since then. So it's very, very difficult for us to talk about peaceful coexistence. And we have tried all sorts of models to create a space for peaceful coexistence by handing over territory. We saw how that worked out in Gaza, for example, by giving autonomy, by preparing them for statehood in many ways, by allowing them to hold arms to do self-policing. Those arms have been turned against us. Hundreds of Israelis have lost their lives at the hands of uniformed Palestinian Authority police officers. So it hasn't worked. It's a failure.
Wow. So your day-to-day work involves making these areas safer places for Israelis, or are we not even there yet?
No, we're not there yet. The day-to-day work of Regavim is to try to, first of all, compel the government of Israel to take responsibility and do its job. Again, I want to stress that we operate everywhere in Israel, not only in Yehuda and Shomron, which is what we're talking about today, but we're just probably better known for our work in the Negev. We're very, very active in the north of the country. We've had 20 years of very, very important policy successes there. And we are, over the past 2 years, we've become very involved in Jerusalem. But our day-to-day work, we aren't police and we aren't the army. What we try to do is to focus a spotlight on the places where the government of Israel has left a void of governance, a void of responsibility, a void of sometimes of legislation or policy. Those voids have allowed the Zionist vision to seep out of Israel's public policy in a lot of ways. And 20 years ago, the three people who came together to form Regavim all understood that the question of land use policy, the most basic resource a country has, is essentially the most basic expression of national sovereignty. The land is what a country is made out of, aside from the people. But without land
and boundaries,
you
and
can't
borders.
be a state.
Sure.
Yes. So you can be a religion, you can be a nation, you can be a people, which is what we've been for thousands of years. But you can't actually be a country, a national entity without land. So right. The people who decide who's using the land, how they're using it, who's protecting it, who's building, who's developing, all of those questions, that's the essence. That's sovereignty in a nutshell. So we address those issues and we try to spotlight where there are problems, where there are failures, where there is something lacking in Israel's public policy. We do that by, first of all, collecting data, mapping it out, going out into the field every day, seeing what's happening to that land resource, and then putting it on a map, and then taking a step back and looking at the dots, connecting them, and saying, what picture emerges? What's the policy? What's the guiding principle behind what we're seeing on the ground? And then how do we address it? How do we correct it?
So I'll tell you what I'm seeing. Mm-hmm. I'm seeing more than 80,000 illegal structures. I'm seeing 150,000 dunams of it. Construction is up by 80% in a single year. So when you see all that data compiled, what do you do with that?
Mm-hmm. So first of all, it's worse than you think.
I'm talking about the construction that's the Palestinian settlements, which nobody talks about. Everybody's talking about the illegal, 5 illegal Jewish settlers who threw a tire down the road after 40 years of I always say that our relationship with the world is completely narcissistic. They gaslight us. They make us think we're the crazy ones. We're the violent ones. Every single thing you accuse me of, they're doing to us. That's it. And they're learning all the tricks based on how we argue that they're trying to flip the script.
Correct.
But I mean, if you're here, you see it with your own eyes.
So before Regavim was established, anytime you read the words in any newspaper anywhere in the world, including in Israel, if you read the words illegal construction, it was automatically assumed Jews are at it again. They're building illegally. What Regavim began to do was to show that the exact same thing, but hundreds of times worse, is actually being done on the other side, and no one's looking at it. So at the moment,
it's even being funded.
It's being funded massively, but there's a guiding hand behind all of it. At the moment, just to give you an idea of the scope of things, there are 103,000 illegal Arab structures in Area C, the area under full Israeli jurisdiction. There's also illegal Jewish construction. 4,311 illegal structures in Area C, Jewish structures, right? So we're talking about 103,000 versus 4,311, right? That's only part of the problem. The bigger part of the problem is exactly what you raised. We map it out. We find every single one of those illegal structures. We put it on a map, and then we take a step back and we say, okay, why are those structures where they are? Why are they there and not somewhere else? So there are several answers to this. First of all, those 103,000 structures, although the number is phenomenal, it's mind-boggling, the strategic value of those structures is even worse than the sheer quantity of them because they're built.
It's construction terrorism.
Yes, absolutely. It's construction annexation, and it's building the launch pad for terrorism.
Yeah, we
This
saw
is
it in
exactly
Gaza.
what we saw along the Gaza border. The Gaza border, I remind you, is minuscule compared to the seam line with the green line that goes all the way from the north of the
Right.
country to the south.
That's why the irony when they say that they care about the land, and meanwhile they're sending helium balloons with explosives and starting fires and burning down villages, and that this is not about a true love, passion for the land. This is territorial, it's war, it's jihadism.
20 wells were poisoned in Binyamin this
And
week.
that affects our
And
livestock. I
that's-
saw a cow suffocating to death from drinking poison water out of a well. And PETA is not talking about it. And if God
Hundreds,
forbid if it was the other way, that a cow was being abused in Jewish territory, in Palestinian, in Jewish territory, it would be all over the news.
Right. So there are hundreds of full flocks of livestock are dying from it. It's poisoning the wells themselves, and that seeps into the soil, and it goes down into the groundwater. We have tracked massive eco-terrorism by the Palestinian Authority that is destroying the entire ecosystem. The Dead Sea is dying because of all the pollution that's running off, all the illegal quarrying that's happening out on the ground. All of these things are what we see as the void of governance. When the government of Israel doesn't behave like a sovereign, doesn't take control and responsibility, we feel that we have no choice.
There's two elements here. There's the security for the Jews, and there's the deterrence for the Arabs. So we need more of both.
Correct. Once you actually start enforcing the law, automatically you get deterrence. Because people, no matter what you say, will not invest their money, and European governments that fund all of this madness will stop investing if they know that their money is just going to be going down the drain.
Yeah, but they know that you're easy prey. I hate to say it. They know that you're easy prey because you don't have the support of your own government.
However, we do now have the support of our own government, quite a lot more over the past, since this government came into power. This 2025 was the first year in which more illegal Arab structures were demolished than were built. And that's the first time ever. We get a Mazal Tov, but we've got to hold the line. It's not something that once it starts, it can't be reversed. It certainly can. We saw that after the election of the quote unquote government of change, Bennett and Lapid's government. The rise, the spike in illegal construction under that government was unprecedented. Even though in the government before that it had come down, all of a sudden, when that government was sworn in, the statistics went off the charts, and that includes also all sorts of illegal construction and squatting and things down in the Negev.
This is really like a game of whack-a-mole almost.
Yes and no. We don't run after each individual structure. What we try to do is change government policy, and where necessary, work towards legislation. We take cases that exemplify a larger phenomenon. We go to court. We sue the government of Israel. Every day we're in court suing the government of Israel.
So if you want to sue the government of Israel, where can they help fund? We'll put a link in the show notes if you ever wanted to sue BB.
Regavim is your place. That is what we do. Regavim.org is our website, and all of our reports, all of our mapping, all of our position papers, successes and failures, everything is there, and donations.
I gotta ask you, because I work in Middle East news. I report on what goes on in the Middle East and North Africa every single day, all day. We come across the stories of the settlers. Sometimes they make international news. I think there was a magazine cover of one of our soldiers looking particularly, demonic.
Yes.
Exactly. Anyone could look like that.
Mhm.
What is the facts? What is the reality on the ground when it comes to what is actually happening in our settler communities? Because I always say mitnachel means it's more than settler. It's to inherit. The land is, it sounds like the movie Avatar, where you see the way everything is interconnected and pulsing. The land is pulsing. The thing is, the Palestinians will say the same thing, but we've just discussed about the way they treat the land. Like they treat,
Correct.
do you love your wife if you're abusing her? Not so much,
Yeah.
As much as you don't want her to leave the house. That's not the way it works. So they definitely have an abusive relationship with Israel. But let's just put it out there once and for all. When people come across these articles and these videos of settlers, Israeli settlers with curly hair and big kippas, and they're being violent and they're throwing things and they're rocks and they're burning villages, what is actually happening? What are the youth Top Hill actually expressing? And how do we support them, not support them? What do you say?
So we asked ourselves the same question. I began to see from a very, very specific area a couple of years ago, an explosion of reports of what they call settler violence. And it raised red flags for me because the reports were all coming from a very, very specific area, an area known in international parlance as Masafar Yatta. As a matter of fact, a documentary that was created in that area won an Oscar in the United States last year. So I began to see all these reports, and I started to scratch my head because the reports that were coming out, always focusing on the same places, started actually getting traction after these very same quote-unquote villages of Masafar Yatta lost in the Israeli Supreme Court over and over again. And the Supreme Court finally shut the lid on all of the Arab lawfare to try to take over this area. So they shifted tactics from the legal to the moral claim. And it goes back to something you mentioned before. The Palestinian Authority, the Palestinian leadership, they learned the playbook very carefully and thoroughly. What they did was they said, okay, why did the countries of the world recognize the state of Israel? Why did they create a Jewish state here? Why did they allow a Jewish state to be here? Because the Jews were victims of tremendous, terrible violence, i.e. the Holocaust. Even though they tried to deny that the Holocaust happened, at the time, the world said, yes, the Jewish people are an ancient people. They are a distinct people with a tradition, language, culture, etc., religion, and they should be protected. And so we will allow them to reconstitute a sovereign national entity in their ancient homeland. And so what did the Arabs say? We need to be victims of the violence so that we can claim we need protection, and therefore we will get a state.
Well, it's a victim mentality.
The victim mentality has been since 1948, but it's not getting them what they want at the rate they want. So they now stepped up the situation.
Also because it's inauthentic when you use your women and children as human shields. No one's really buying your story that you're mourning these losses.
But that's the thing with Masafar Yatta. What is Masafar Yatta? There are quote-unquote 16 villages of Masafar Yatta. These are illegal outposts inside a live IDF military training zone, an area that was used for Air Force drills for years, live fire training from the IDF. Tanks are in there, shooting practice, navigation practice. Inside a live firing zone, they created villages. They moved in women and children and livestock. And for them, it's considered a win-win. If someone gets hurt, then Israel looks bad. And if no one gets hurt and Israel says, well, we can't actually train here because there are civilians, so we'll pull back, which is what Israel did for years, they win again because they've just taken over a very important strategic area.
Because they're speaking out of two sides of their mouth.
Of course, but I want to stress one thing. Unfortunately, really unfortunately, I cannot say there is no violence. That's not a claim that I can make.
I don't either say that, but at some point it's
correct. However, we wanted to know how much violence, and we wanted to know, is it really what they say it is? So we started digging. We dug down into the data set that fuels this entire narrative. So anyone who is familiar with, for example, the sanctions that the Biden administration imposed on Israeli settlers and some organizations in Judea and Samaria because of this supposed violence, or the sanctions in Europe, or all of the mass condemnations by all the European Union
NGOs and organizations,
and all of that. It's all based on one data set, and that is provided by the United Nations Office of Coordination for Humanitarian Affairs, otherwise known as OCHA. They have a wonderful dashboard on the internet. You can just click on it and you can see all these lovely, colorful graphs by location, by age of the victim, and on that dashboard, it says on the right-hand side, click here for the full data set. We wanted to know what all of their graphs were based on, because they tell you percentages and things, but you don't see the real reports. So we clicked I clicked on the right and I said, I'd like to see that data. And the answer I got was, we only share that data with organizations with whom we partner. So I said, okay, we'd like to partner with you. We are Regavim. We are a recognized Israeli nonprofit that deals with these issues in these areas. And they said, well, I said, how do you become a partner? And they said, we decide who we partner with, and we'll never partner with you, and you're not getting the data. So we did a kind of back door. We worked with a European criminologist who applied to OCHA and actually received the data. And we began to analyze this full data set. That means 6,833 incident reports of settler violence.
6,000. In how many years?
We covered a 7-year period.
Okay.
That included the period after the outbreak of the 2023 war, the Swords of Iron. And we examined every single one. Now, before we even examined the data, what the OCHA website itself says is, all of their incident reports are included in the data set if they are cross-checked between two verifiable, impartial sources. So every single one of these 6,833, and
who are the sources? Al Jazeera and BBC?
That's a very good question. We wanted to know that too, which is, of course, part of the data that we received. So the first thing that we found was, without even diving into or making a cross-check, what they reported, we found that 95% of all the incidents they reported either didn't involve settlers, meaning civilians, didn't involve violence, or didn't happen in Judea and Samaria. So they include things, for example, like Jews going up to the Temple Mount. They classify that as
settler violence.
Storming Al-Aqsa.
Yes.
Settler violence. Traffic accidents that involve Palestinian Arabs and Jews, settler violence. Anytime the state of Israel...
Sounds like the COVID numbers.
It's even crazier than that. Anytime the state of Israel paves a road in Area C on Israeli state land, it's a government road improvement project that improves the lives of Arabs and Jews alike, settler violence, they call that, trespass and expropriation of Palestine. So all of this is included in their settler violence statistics.
Words don't mean anything anymore.
When a class trip from Herzliya goes to visit a site of historic or religious importance in Yehuda and Shomron, and I'll remind you, all the stories of the Bible happened in what is now called Judea and Samaria. That
biblical
is
heartland.
That biblical heartland, right? So if you take a class from Herzliya and you go and visit the site of the ancient tabernacle in Shiloh, that's settler violence. All 30 of those kids who happen to live not in a settlement, but in Israel, sovereign Israel, go to visit there's no confrontation, there's no violence, there's no settlers.
But they don't want
But they are 30 members of the rampaging, violent settler movement, right? So all of these things we discounted right off the bat. We found an overwhelming majority of the cases that there were victims, there were people who were either injured or killed. Those were confrontations between Arab rioters or attempted terrorists, and the IDF had nothing to do with Israeli civilians. Also, we noted that on the OCHA website dashboard on the internet, they actually say that they include in the casualties and fatalities terrorists who are harmed in the act of trying to kill Jews. So if an Arab invades an Israeli home
And gets shot.
and tries to slaughter everyone living in it and gets shot in the process, that's settler
So
violence.
we could take the numbers, slash them, and
slash them down to almost nothing. We also investigated, for example, things that we could not, we cross-referenced with Israel police reports, Shabak material, IDF reports, newspaper accounts of the same incidents that were left after we took out the 95%, and found an overwhelming majority of the ones that were left were acts of self-defense. There were some incidents of violence, but I'll ask you, how many Arabs have been killed in the past 10 years by violent Israeli civilians?
Almost
unprovoked. Not almost
none. Not only that, but
not
none.
almost none.
None.
Zero.
Also, I was to say the Arabs were protesting their own violence. They were out on the streets saying that Israeli security needs to be heightened in their neighborhoods because they're killing each other in our cities.
Correct. So you have all of this nonsense, and in addition to which, we began to look at the sources of reporting. So we convened a Knesset committee hearing on to discuss this whole problem. The chief of the Judea and Samaria region police force, the Israel police has a separate region for Judea and Samaria, and the commander of this unit came and he said that over 70% of the incidents, that the complaints that the police receive about violent incidents in Judea and Samaria turn out to be completely fabricated. Some European activist sitting in a cafe in Tel Aviv picks up the phone and calls the Israel police and says, so-and-so at this place attacked me brutally, unprovoked and whatever. And by the time they finish examining all of this and whatever, the case is dismissed. But that's also a win-win, because afterwards you'll get all of the leftist organizations that say, only 5% of the cases go to indictment. And so Israel is very lenient with all of these criminals. No, it's because 70% never happened to begin with, and another 25% of what's left were acts of self-defense. And so even the ones that are examined, people aren't indicted. And what we found also was that the rate of indictment of Jews in Judea and Samaria is actually higher than the rate of indictment against Arabs in Judea and Samaria or Jews in the rest of Israel. And we compared the indictment and conviction rates to those in other countries, Western countries, and we're actually much higher. So
I'm so happy to put these rumors to rest.
Yes.
And for people to have a little insight of what's happening, what's going on. Because, like I said earlier, words have become meaningless in a world where Hamas are freedom fighters and Israeli soldiers are terrorists.
Correct.
So it's really, really important that you see past the headlines and you do that kind of critical thinking and look up these organizations that are doing the legwork here. And I just want to say that it's incredibly inspiring to see you're an Anglo, you're an American, somebody who sacrificed so much. I'm sure, forget about the fact that where you live, just driving there is risky business every day, but you put yourself out there. It's not the safest neighborhood. So on behalf of Am Yisrael, I want to thank you for your commitment to our land and to promoting our security and doing what you can to make sure that we can grow and expand, and our grandchildren should live on this land, our God-inherited land that was given to us and promised to us by the God of the Jewish people to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And that is all very undeniable. For our people watching at home, okay, we'll do a quick a speed round of 4 questions. And then I just want to wrap up with one more personal question. Okay, Naomi, thank you. What is something you wish every Jewish American college student would understand about the situation here in Israel with our Palestinian cousins?
First of all, that it's wonderful when people talk about rights, but you have to remember we have rights too. And I don't think any other nation, any other people, certainly no other country has ever been expected to put the rights of others before their own rights, except for us. And unfortunately, we've fallen into that for far too long. We have rights. We have rights on every possible front.
Jewish lives matter.
Jewish lives
Israeli
matter.
lives matter.
History matters. Facts matter. Our legal, historical, religious, and moral rights all speak the same truth. We have rights here, and we should exercise them. That doesn't mean that we should not recognize other people's rights. It means that we have to fight for our own.
And if you don't know what they are, then look
Find
into it
out.
so that you can argue those points.
Find
because
out.
the information is there. Eugene Kantorowicz has been arguing these points for decades. Tell us about a moment in your work that genuinely gave you hope. Maybe share something really worthwhile.
It happens every day. Every day. I received the challenges are every day, but we yesterday were informed that one of the founders of Regavim was just appointed to an incredibly crucial new position. It's a very gray, bureaucratic position that no one outside of a very small circle understands its importance. But it gives me tremendous hope because this is a person of tremendous ideological commitment and tremendous capability who has already made a huge difference in land use policy in Judea and Samaria. And now we will have the opportunity to make the same impact on land use policy throughout the land of Israel. And we believe that this is going to make a huge change, certainly in the Galilee, where we are losing the Jewish majority because of bad land use policies that have been allowed to seep into our public policy. And we really believe that that's going to change, and quickly.
I think you answered my third question of what is the one thing the Israeli government should do tomorrow that would be the change we need.
If we're talking about Judea and Samaria, there are many things that need to be done. The first thing that needs to be done, like I said 1 minute ago, the state of Israel needs to speak about its rights and to defend them, even when that's not popular, even when our allies find it offensive.
Like Ben Shapiro says, facts don't care about your feelings. Facts don't care about your feelings.
Correct. We should not care about anyone else's feelings. We should care first and foremost about our feelings and our rights. And the government of Israel has for too long declined to declare our rights in Yehuda and Shomron clearly.
Making the residents as sacrificial lambs.
Correct. Speak up. Speak the right. Even if you don't act on them, repeat the rights that we have to Yehuda and Shomron. Don't let anyone forget them, because as soon as you do, it's a slippery slope and you're halfway down before you start.
Amazing. A personal question for you. What do your grandchildren think about the work that you do, and how do you keep your children inspired, considering how challenging it could be to live here? You know, in the last 9 years, I have experienced, I remember hearing Ari Fold was killed. I remember hearing those two beautiful boys with the blue eyes, and then the D sisters with their mom, and then October 7th, forget about COVID. COVID's, let's say, a natural disaster. And then the war with Iran. I work in the news. I see the blood that's spilled and the tears that are shed and the families that are grieving. So what is it that you continue to relay and convey to your children and grandchildren, and that we can convey across our platform, across the world, to people who are not sure what they feel about Israel and why it matters?
I'm very fortunate because my children are the ones who give me strength and reassurance, and not the other way around. A very long time ago, when my oldest son, who's now, thank God, a father of 4, when he was in high school, at a certain point, he wanted to leave school to go to a funeral of someone he knew who had been killed in a terrorist attack. And I was very, very hesitant. I said, he was a kid. He was maybe 14. And I called my husband and I said, do you think this is a good idea? Funerals for 14. I had never been to a funeral in my life at that age. And I think about that often, because years later, my daughter actually said to me, Ima, I've been to more funerals than I have weddings this year. All of them have lost close friends, dear friends. All of them have, my son serve in the army. And and national service and all of these things, they're part of the fabric. They want to know other life. They need no other life. They seek no other life. They find fulfillment in being part of a chain of generations that knows what is right, and are willing to fight for it. So I get strength from them and not the other way around. My grandchildren think it's kind of cool when every once in a while they see me on television or...
You carry a gun?
No, I do not.
Oh, you don't.
I do not. My husband years ago made a joke actually about how only in Israel it's a legitimate birthday present to buy your son a gun. But my children are armed. I do not carry a gun.
Hashem protects you. You're doing good things.
We try. We do. Yes, and you learn resilience.
You learn resilience, sure, and you just become part of the story here, and you can never.
Yes,
you can't leave.
You know that a life of purpose gives you strength to do things that you never imagined, and commitment gives you the strength to sacrifice, because without it, your sacrifice is meaningless.
Right. If you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything. But
that is correct.
You have to really know what matters. And that's why we're here. That's why we're here at Moral Edge and talking to people like you who make a life out of what matters. And like I said earlier, on behalf of all of Am Yisrael, thank you for continuing the good fight and for making a difference day by day. If you liked this episode, be sure to subscribe. Leave us your thoughts in the show notes and visit our website, moraledge.com. Thank you so much, Naomi.
Thank you.
Every week, I sit across from someone who chose this place, who built something here, fought for something here, or is quietly holding something together that the rest of the world doesn't see. And every week, I'm reminded that Israel is not just a headline. It's a collection of people with a story worth knowing. If today's conversation moved you, share it. The people doing this work need an audience, and the stories need to travel further than our own circles. This is the Weekly Squeeze Breakdown on Moral Edge. I'm Chanala.